As China remains embroiled in a tense standoff with India in the Himalayas and its warplanes enter Taiwanese airspace every other day, intrusions into Japanese waters by Chinese vessels have attracted relatively little attention, until now. Chinese government vessels were spotted in waters near the Japan-controlled Senkaku Islands for a record 66th consecutive day on Thursday, June 18th. Citing a spokesman for the Japan 11th Regional Coast Guard Headquarters, the Stars and Stripes reported that 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels appeared about 18 miles north-northwest of Uotsuri Island around 9 a.m. Thursday. Also on Thursday, a Chinese submarine was detected underwater heading west near Amami Oshima Island, the Japan Times reported, citing the Ministry of Defense. An MSDF patrol aircraft, the Ashigata Aegis guided missile destroyer and the Kaga helicopter carrier were used to monitor the submarine. Japan has administered the Senkaku Islands since 1972 when the U.S. returned Okinawa to Japanese control. The islands are claimed by Japan, China, and Taiwan and lie between both Japan and China's exclusive economic zones. The islands are surrounded by rich fishing grounds and lie near potential oil and gas reserves. The United States has refused to take a position on who has sovereignty over the Senkakus, but both Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump have declared the islands fall under the U.S.-Japan Security Alliance. Stay tuned to TomoNews for updates on China's muscle flexing as they become available. In the meantime, if you missed our coverage of the Chinese ambush of Indian soldiers in the Himalayas or of China's recent violations of Taiwanese airspace, you can watch it here now. As the world is distracted by the coronavirus pandemic, China has stepped up military activities all over the place aimed at intimidating or provoking its neighbors. There was Monday's attack in the Himalayas that left 20 Indian soldiers dead at last count and dozens missing. Pressures in Malaysia and Indonesia in the South China Sea, the ramming of a Vietnamese fishing boat last week. But we're particularly worried about what now looks like a deliberate pattern of escalations over the Taiwan Strait. Here is what you need to know. Taiwan's Air Force on June 17th again warned off Chinese warplanes that approached the country, the Defense Ministry said, reporting the 4th such intrusion in just 9 days. The Chinese J-10, a fighter jet, and Y-8, a turboprop surveillance aircraft, entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone to the southwest of the country on Wednesday. Taiwanese fighter planes issued a verbal warning to the Chinese aircraft to leave, and the Chinese planes immediately left the air defense identification zone. The latest incursion came just 1 day after a J-10 fighter entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone from the southwest. It was issued radio warnings to leave and then escorted out of Taiwanese airspace. That followed a flight in the same area on June 12th by a Chinese Y-8, which was issued a verbal warning by Taiwan's Air Force to leave its airspace. The Y-8 flight came only a few hours after Taiwan announced it had conducted missile tests at 2 locations off its eastern coast. Taiwan did not say what missiles were tested, but Tiancong-3 surface-to-air missiles and Yongfeng land attack cruise missiles were tested in the same area in April. Such incursions were rare until a year ago, when in March of 2019, 2 Chinese J-11 fighter jets crossed over the median line in the Taiwan Strait for the first time in years. Beijing also sailed its Shandong aircraft carrier through the strait in December, shortly before Taiwan's presidential election. Stay tuned for updates on China's muscle flexing as they become available. In the meantime, if you missed our coverage of Monday's clash between China and India or last week's violation of Taiwanese airspace by advanced Chinese J-30 fighters, which had to be chased away by Taiwanese Air Force, you can catch it here now. China and India have had ongoing disputes over the effective border between the two countries, known as the Line of Actual Control, for decades. The most recent confrontation broke out into a lethal clash that has left at least 20 Indian border troopers dead. Here is what you need to know. Indian and Chinese border defense troops had a deadly encounter last Monday that left at least 20 Indian soldiers, including a colonel, dead, according to the Times of India. The New York Times reports a dozen Indian soldiers remain missing. They are thought to have been captured by Chinese forces. The clash occurred in the Galwan Valley region of eastern Ladakh. Details of the encounter are unclear. However, The Guardian reports that the altercation seems to have happened when Indian border troops unexpectedly met Chinese troops while patrolling. China and India have had decades-long disputes over the Line of Actual Control, which separates the two countries. The two countries fought a war over the region in 1962 and have since continued to have frequent conflicts in the area. And what does China have to say about this deadly incident? Well, according to China's Global Times, it was the Indian troops who provoked the attack by crossing the line of actual control. The jingoistic state-run outlet also claims that the clash was intentionally staged as an effort to take over Chinese territory and deflect attention from India's management of the COVID-19 epidemic. The real question is, how are two growing military powers run by nationalist leaders and armed with nuclear weapons going to de-escalate tensions peacefully when both want to assert their power in the Himalayan border? Let us know what you think, Tomo Sapiens. Hours after a U.S. transport plane made a rare flight over Taiwan, a group of Chinese warplanes entered Taiwanese airspace. Taiwan's Air Force scrambled planes to warn off multiple Chinese fighter jets that had briefly entered Taiwan's air defense identification zone on June 9th, the country's defense ministry said in a statement. The Su-30 fighters, some of China's most advanced jets, were issued verbal warnings to leave, and Taiwanese Air Force jets drove away the intruders, the ministry said. The military has full surveillance and control of all activities in the sea and air that surround Taiwan, and the public can rest assured of our capability to uphold security for our national territory, the ministry said. The Defense Ministry confirmed that a U.S. C-48 transport plane had just hours before passed over Taiwan with permission near Taipei before heading south along the country's coast. The incident occurred a day after the commander of the U.S. 7th Fleet confirmed that the guided missile destroyer USS Russell had passed through the Taiwan Strait the previous week. This was the U.S. Navy's 7th such transit this year and second in 2 weeks, according to a report in the Stars and Stripes. The Japan Times reports U.S. electronic warfare aircraft may have passed the strait 14 times in April alone. The Chinese incursion also came hours after Taiwan's defense ministry announced the country's annual Han-Kwang exercises, which had been postponed due to the coronavirus, will be conducted in July and September, Taiwan's central news agency reports. The annual exercises test the country's capabilities to ward off attacks from China's People's Liberation Army. Beijing is ramping up military maneuvers aimed at intimidating or provoking Taiwan. Amidst a deadly global pandemic, China is planning to rattle sabers against Taiwan with major military exercise, according to the Japanese press. China's People Liberation Army Navy plans to conduct a large-scale amphibious assault drill off Hainan Island in August. Citing unnamed Chinese sources, the Japan Times reports the drill will involve landing ships, hovercraft, and helicopters, while the carrier Shandong has been deployed in Hainan since December last year. According to the Japan Times, the exercise is designed to simulate a Navy and Marines attack on the Taiwan-held Pratas, a strategically important islet that sits astride China's military egress from Hainan to the Pacific Ocean. Tensions between Beijing and Taipei rose after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen was elected into office in 2016, on a wave of popular anger against the pro-Beijing policies of her predecessor Ma Ying-jeou. According to Reuters, Taiwan in April announced plans to buy arms from France to upgrade its fleet of 6 French-made Lafayette-class frigates. Responding to protests from Beijing, France's foreign ministry suggests China should focus on battling COVID-19 instead. En anglais, it means go pound the sand. The U.S. Naval Institute reports a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer made a transit through the Taiwan Strait to warn Beijing's leadership against taking aggressive action in the region. The Japan Times reports U.S. electronic warfare aircraft may have passed the strait 14 times in April alone. According to Taiwan's state-run central news agency, a Chinese Y-8 aircraft flew into Taiwan's air defense identification zone before being headed off by fighter jets on April 8th. This is the 7th time Chinese military planes flew near Taiwan's airspace this year. Taiwan has not been sitting idle in the face of Chinese aggression. Last year, we at TomoNews covered Taiwan's procurement of F-16V fighters from the U.S., the most advanced version of the Viper ever produced.
Taiwan's state-run central news agency reports that Taipei has signed a U.S. arms deal for 66 F-16V fighters while upgrading older models to F-16V standard. According to Lockheed Martin, the F-16V is the latest variant of the F-16, a multi-role fighter that features advanced weaponry, targeting systems, electronics, and radar. Citing an unnamed military source, CNA reports that the F-16Vs have better weapons than the older generation J-11 fighters used by China's People's Liberation Army. According to the source, the F-16V may not be a match for the PLA's J-20 stealth fighter, but Taiwanese jets could utilize friendly early warning aircraft to contain the threat. Jane's Information Group reports that Lockheed Martin will establish an F-16 maintenance center in Taiwan with the locally owned Aerospace Industrial Development Corporation. According to Jane's, the facility will provide maintenance and logistical support to Taiwan's F-16 fleet in addition to refurbishing 140 F-16A and Bs to F-16Vs. The PLA deploys about 700 fighters in China's southeastern coast, which is double the size of Taiwan's tactical air arm. CNA cites the source as saying that the combination of F-16Vs and air defense systems give Taiwan's military a needed boost to combat the PLA's superior numbers. Citing Associate Professor Ling Ying-yo at the National Zhongzhen University, the CNA reports that China's carriers are now a threat to Taiwan's eastern defensive perimeter. CNA cites Lin as saying that the F-16Vs and anti-ship missiles will serve as a deterrent to Chinese carriers and aircraft operating in the seas east of Taiwan.
For more news animations and explainers, hit the subscribe and bell button to join the TomoNews family. Thanks for watching.